Hi and welcome to another Watch Geek video. Today we take a look at another hot release of 2019 when it comes to affordable watches, the Timex Q Diver. A reissue of the first quartz diver made by Timex in 1979 has created a bit of a frenzy, as these got sold out everywhere, resulting in used ones on eBay costing double the retail price, in a way mimicking the Rolex effect. Which is funny as the watch actually mimics the Rolex GMT Master. But let's get back to the past. The Timex Q line started in 1972, and it marked the introduction of quartz movements in the Timex lineup. Up until then, quartz that came to the market in 1969 via Seiko Astron was a novelty and very expensive. Given how superior this technology was to mechanical watches, when it comes to accuracy and reliability, it was only a matter of time and price before it took over. The Timex Q were among the first affordable quartz watches, making them one of the nails in the coffin of Swiss mechanical watch industry of the time. In 1979, the original Q Diver was introduced, and it was a cheap quartz watch with a styling borrowed from a more prestigious brand. Something a lot of manufacturers were doing, and to be completely honest, still are doing. I don't know how much success it had back then, but given how much hype this reissue created, I wouldn't be surprised if it sold in bucket loads. When it comes to reissues, we often see brands trying to improve on the original when recreating it. Some of these improvements are welcomed, like the inclusion of a modern scratch-proof sapphire instead of the easy-to-scratch acrylic crystal, or the construction of the bracelet with solid links and milled-out clasp instead of cheap folded links of the yesteryears. These improvements are always welcomed, but sadly brands don't stop there. They try to improve in the wrong places as well, usually in size by making the reissue bigger, bulkier, and often disrupting the perfect proportions of the original. In worst-case scenarios, they even tamper in the design itself by including modern parts to blend with the current design language of the lineup, like Seiko does with their reinterpretations. When they do make a watch as close to the original as possible, they will usually charge you an arm and a leg for it, placing the watch completely out of the market the original was aiming for. And in that lies the success of this piece, and the reason they're sold out everywhere. Timex took their historical model, recreated it in almost 1-to-1 ratio, changed almost nothing, and most importantly priced the watch at the same market level the original was priced at. In other words, we finally got what we always wanted when it comes to reissues, and I'm glad the market rewarded Timex for it, as maybe it will show others how it's actually done. Getting this watch is the equivalent of getting into a time machine, going back to the year 1979 and purchasing one back then. Sadly, that is also the biggest flaw of this watch, as Timex not only carried over the design and proportions of the original, but also the technology. They didn't improve anything on this compared to the original, which I'm sure is one of the main reasons the price is so low. As a result, this thing feels like a cheap watch from the 70s because it is made like a cheap watch from the 70s. The easy-to-scratch acrylic crystal is still here. The bezel comes with an aluminum insert and has no clicks. It is a simple friction bezel. The water resistance is just 50 meters, making the name Diver a bit of a joke. The bracelet is an exact copy of the one from the 70s, and as such, it is thin, looks cheap, and is a hair puller. The only good thing about this retro technology is the sliding clasp, as it allows an infinite amount of positions, meaning anyone can get a perfect fit. Even the movement used, supposedly a cheap Seiko movement, is as cheap as it gets, with the seconds hand stopping all over the place except the markers themselves. Speaking of the markers, the loom is also pretty poor. So if this thing feels so cheap and is made in such a cheap way, why are people still buying it? Well, partly it is because it is cheap to buy. but mainly it's down to the way this thing looks. I mean, just look at it. The crisp Pepsi bezel with a clean line between two colors, the blue dial that looks perfect with the faux patina lume, and the beautiful slim case. When I put this thing on my wrist, it makes me smile and I instantly forget the pain caused by the bracelet or the poor lume. It's like when you first fall in love. Everyone sees the bad sides, and you are aware of them, but you just don't care, as for you, everything is perfect. Despite having its drawbacks, I still prefer a reissue done this way than completely ruining it by changing everything about it, like so many brands do. So kudos to Timex for having the courage to come up with something like this, and I'm really happy they're being rewarded for that. This watch is actually a loaner from a colleague of mine, but after spending a week with it and completely falling in love, I'm afraid I might get one for myself as well. That is how cool this thing looks. Well, that completes this week's video, so thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and until the next video, bye.